Gone. All of it. That's what she said. I remember her exact tone. Casual, almost cheerful, like she was telling me about a movie she'd just watched. I was sitting in my car behind the grocery store, parked near the dumpster because that's where the Wi-Fi signal was strongest. My phone balanced on the steering wheel, battery at 3%, the sun bleeding through the windshield in streaks of orange. She said the words again, slower this time. The $850,000. It's gone. Crypto crash. Some betrayals don't leave scars. They leave lessons. Stay with me till the end because what started as a lie about lost money turned into a truth no one saw coming. I didn't scream. I didn't even breathe. I just stared at the cracked plastic of my dashboard and listened to her voice, smooth as melted butter. That was her gift. She could lie and sound like a saint while doing it. She started explaining something about market volatility, about digital assets, and portfolio collapse. She said it like she'd been studying finance her whole life, but I knew she'd barely understood how to use her phone 6 months ago. Don't blame yourself, she added lightly. Your father trusted me with the account. I only wanted to help. There was a long pause. The kind of pause that makes you hear your own heartbeat. A shopping cart rolled somewhere nearby. A tin can rattled across the pavement. I felt the coldness creeping into my hands even though the car was warm. Help, I repeated quietly. You wanted to help. Yes, she said brightly. But crypto is unpredictable. We lost. That word burned. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My hair was sticking up in uneven tufts, the gray strands catching the light like threads of wire. My eyes looked tired, hollow. I whispered to myself she said we, because if she had truly lost it she would have said I. She went on talking about how devastated she was, how she hadn't slept. Her performance was flawless. The kind of sympathy people believe when it comes with soft sighs and a trembling voice. I'm just so sorry, she finished. I know that money meant stability for you. For me. Not us. For me, like it wasn't even mine anymore. I wanted to hang up but I didn't. I listened. Because something in me, the quiet, patient part that life hadn't managed to kill yet, told me to remember every word. Every phrase, every hesitation. She coughed lightly and said she had to take another call. A banker friend, she mentioned. Maybe he can help recover some of it. Then the line went dead. I sat there until the phone battery gave up and the screen went black. The grocery store lights flickered on, the parking lot humming with evening traffic. Somewhere a kid laughed, a dog barked. Life went on as if nothing had just collapsed. I folded my hands in my lap and whispered, 850,000. It didn't sound real anymore. That money wasn't luxury. It was my late husband's life insurance. It was supposed to keep me from ending up exactly where I was, living in a car counting coins for gas. A gust of wind rattled the grocery carts. My stomach growled but I couldn't move. I watched an older couple loading groceries into their trunk, laughing, arguing about paper versus plastic, and thought of the nights I'd spent balancing our checkbook beside my husband. He'd trusted her, his second wife, to manage things after his health declined. I'd trusted his judgment. Maybe that was my real mistake. I finally reached into the glove box, searching for gum, and instead found a crumpled diner receipt from months ago. Coffee $2.15, tip $1. I flattened it against the steering wheel, took a pen from my coat pocket and wrote her name across it. Martha. The ink bled slightly into the paper. I didn't know why I did it. Maybe I wanted to see her name under a total, a balance owed. Then headlights flashed behind me. A security guard's car slowed down. I pretended to check my phone, pretending I had somewhere to be. He didn't stop. Just drove off slowly. I leaned my head back against the seat and closed my eyes. The smell of old coffee lingered in the cup holder. The air felt heavy, almost oily. That's when the smallest detail hit me, something she said that didn't make sense. When she'd mentioned her banker friend, I heard papers shuffling. Not the kind of paper you keep at home. Thick, stiff sheets like contracts. I'd spent 30 years working as an office assistant. I knew that sound too well. She wasn't calling a banker. She was signing something. The thought made my heart thud so hard it hurt. I turned the phone back on. Dead. No way to check anything tonight. But my mind was awake now, sharper than it had been in months. Maybe she thought I was weak. Maybe she thought losing my home, my husband, my savings had turned me into dust. But dust can still settle in corners and wait. I stepped out of the car, stretching my stiff legs. The night air was cold, thin, carrying the smell of fried chicken from a nearby drive-thru. I walked toward the small convenience store by the gas station. I needed coffee, maybe something to keep me awake. Not physically but inside. The cashier, a young woman with chipped purple nails, looked up and smiled politely. "Long night. Long year," I said. She chuckled softly and handed me a styrofoam cup. "Refills are free tonight. We had a mix-up with the machine." "Thank you," I said, and I meant it. As I poured the coffee, I caught my reflection again in the glass. I looked older than I felt, lines deeper, eyes darker. But behind them something flickered. Not anger exactly. Not yet. Just awareness. When I returned to the car, I opened the small notebook I always kept for grocery lists. On the first page I wrote, date, March 4th. Call from M. Crypto crash, lost everything. Background noise. Papers typing, faint laughter. Mood, too calm. Rehearsed. Then I drew a small circle around the word we. The next morning I drove to the public library. They opened at 9 a.m. I was there at 8:30, waiting by the doors with my coffee gone cold. The librarian, Mrs. Dunn, recognized me. I'd been there before, using the computers to apply for jobs. She smiled kindly. "Early start." "Something like that," I said. I logged into a computer and typed crypto fraud signs into the search bar. I didn't understand half of what I read, but I recognized a few things she'd mentioned on the call: liquidity pool, wallet transfer, exchange freeze. She hadn't just parroted words from the news. Someone had taught her those phrases. Someone who knew how to hide money. I printed a few pages and slipped them into my bag. When I stepped outside, the morning sun hit my face and I realized I wasn't shaking anymore. I wasn't helpless, I was just uninformed. And that could be fixed. Still, part of me wanted to believe there'd been a mistake. That maybe the market really did crash. I decided to call her again just once to see how she'd react. That evening, I found a quiet corner of a laundromat and plugged my phone into an outlet near the floor. When it powered on, there were no messages, no missed calls. I dialed her number. "Martha speaking," she answered, voice crisp, distant, like a secretary at a firm. "Hi, it's me," I said. "I wanted to ask, did the bank confirm the loss?" "Oh, sweetheart," she said, lowering her tone to that syrupy sweetness I used to mistake for kindness. "There's nothing more to confirm. It's over. The whole account drained. I'm dealing with it so you don't have to worry." Something in me clicked. I said quietly, "That's kind of you." "It's what family does," she replied. There it was, the same weapon she always used, guilt dressed as love. Before I hung up, she added, "Try to get some rest, okay? You sound tired." I forced a small laugh. "I'm fine," I said. "Just thinking." "Oh. About numbers." She hesitated. "What kind of numbers?" "The kind that always leave a trail," I answered softly. She laughed uneasily, then changed the subject, saying she had guests over for dinner. I heard clinking glasses, distant laughter, and the faintest echo of music. The sound of comfort. The sound of my money. When the call ended, I sat there staring at the washing machines spinning in endless circles, each one humming like a heartbeat. My reflection appeared and disappeared behind the glass door of one. Distorted, watery. I whispered, "You think you're safe." Outside, the wind carried the smell of rain. I climbed back into my car, wrapped a blanket over my knees and opened my notebook again. On the top of the page I wrote, "Step 1, listen. Because people like her always talk too much when they think you're powerless." That night, for the first time in weeks, I didn't cry. I just stared at the diner receipt on my dashboard. Her name had faded a little, but the word total still glared beneath it. One day I thought, I'll balance this out. A pair of headlights passed by, briefly lighting up the inside of my car. The pen, the paper, the shadows under my eyes. I smiled faintly and whispered, "Sleep while you can, Martha." Then I closed the notebook and leaned back. The sound of rain began tapping on the roof, slow and rhythmic, almost like a countdown. And somewhere deep inside, a quiet part of me, the part that had endured too many betrayals, finally woke up. The rain hadn't stopped by morning. It tapped on the car roof in soft, stubborn bursts, like it was testing my patience. I didn't mind. It drowned out my thoughts and gave me time to breathe. I'd spent half the night staring at the diner receipt on my dashboard until the ink bled a little from the damp air. Martha's name still showed faintly, a promise half kept. When the sky lightened to a pale gray, I wiped the fog from the windshield and turned the ignition. The car sputtered but came alive on the third try. I drove to the diner where I'd been picking up shifts, Frankie's Roadside Grill. It wasn't much, just a squat brick building with a flickering neon sign that buzzed louder than the morning rush. The windows always smelled faintly of bacon grease and the coffee never really tasted fresh, but it was warm and it paid cash. Inside, the heat wrapped around me like an old quilt. I tied my apron, pinned my name tag, Helen, and checked the pie case. Apple, pecan, and something that used to be lemon. I poured the first pot of coffee and tried not to think about the $850,000 that once promised me comfort. The bell above the door jingled at 6:03 a.m. Regulars trickled in. The truckers, the mailman, the two teachers who always whispered about their principal. I smiled at all of them, took orders, refilled mugs. Every thank you felt mechanical, but it kept me steady. By noon, the rain had stopped, replaced by a wind that rattled the windows. That's when I saw him. My Uncle Ray. He stood by the entrance, letting the door swing shut behind him, hat in hand, eyes scanning the room until they landed on me. He looked older than I remembered, thinner hair, a heavier sadness around the eyes. When he recognized me, his face went pale like he'd seen a ghost. "Helen," he said softly. "Afternoon, Uncle Ray." I kept my voice even, wiping down a table that didn't need cleaning. "What on earth?" He stopped mid-sentence, taking in my apron, the stain on my sleeve, the cheap sneakers peeking under the hem of my jeans. I gestured to a booth by the window. "Sit. Coffee's still on the house for family." He slid in slowly, setting his hat on the seat beside him. "Your stepmother said you'd moved out west." I poured his coffee and leaned one hand on the counter. "She says a lot of things." He stirred his cup even though he hadn't added sugar. "You look tired." "I've been busy," I said, forcing a small smile. "How's she doing?" That question landed heavy between us. He looked down, tracing the rim of the cup with his finger. "She's fine. Bought a property not far from the lake. Cash sale." I froze mid-pour. The stream of coffee overflowed slightly, dark liquid slipping down the pot's edge and burning my knuckle. I didn't flinch. "Cash. That's what surprised me," he said quietly. "After this loss she mentioned. Thought she'd be tightening her belt." My throat tightened. "Did she say where the money came from?" "No," he said. "But she had that same confident look your father used to have when he'd closed a deal." He sighed. "She even joked that crypto wasn't such a bad gamble after all." The diner felt smaller all at once. The clatter of dishes, the hum of conversation, it all blurred into static. I nodded slowly, pretending to listen, pretending my heart wasn't hammering so loud it drowned everything else. "Thank you," I said finally. "For what?" "For confirming what I already knew." He frowned. "Helen, what's going on?" I straightened, collected his empty sugar packets and forced a calm I didn't feel. "Nothing I can't handle." "Do you want pie?" He studied me for a long moment, like he wanted to ask more but knew he wouldn't get answers. "Pecan," he said at last. "And Helen, you know you can always call me, right?" "I know." When I brought him the slice, he slipped a folded 20 under his saucer. "Keep it," he said. "You look like you could use a break." I smiled faintly. "You'd be surprised what I can live without." He chuckled sadly, finished his pie and left without another word. I watched him cross the parking lot through the rain-streaked glass. As soon as his car disappeared, I went to the supply closet in the back. The flickering light bulb buzzed overhead, shadows jumping across the shelves stacked with napkins and mop water. I pulled out my small notebook and opened to the page where I'd written Step 1. Listen. Underneath, I scribbled Step 2, collect. Then I began writing everything Uncle Ray had said, every date, every tone, every word she used when she bragged. My coworker Sandy poked her head in. "You hiding back here?" "Just catching up on inventory," I lied, tucking the notebook under a box of straws. He shrugged. "Frankie's looking for you. Couple in booth 4 needs refills." "On it," I said, grabbing the coffee pot. The rest of the shift passed in a blur. I smiled when needed, laughed when someone cracked a joke about the weather, but my mind was miles away. On a lake house I'd never seen, on papers my uncle had mentioned, on my stepmother's calm voice saying we lost. When closing time came, I stayed behind to wipe the counters and count the till. Frankie handed me my pay envelope. You sure you're okay, Helen? Fine, I said. Just thinking. He gave me a sympathetic grin. Don't think too hard. The world ain't worth that kind of headache. Maybe not for him. For me, thinking was survival. That night, I drove back to the parking lot behind the grocery store, but I didn't crawl into the back seat. I sat upright, pulled out my phone and searched county property records. The signal was weak, but the page loaded. I typed her name, Martha J. Caldwell, and waited. The screen showed 2 results. One was her current address. The other a recent purchase, Lakeside Drive. Date, 2 weeks ago. Buyer, J. Caldwell Trust. My stomach flipped. That wasn't a personal buy, that was a cover. I scrolled down, eyes scanning the numbers until they landed on the sale price. $820,000. The rain started again, light and steady. I exhaled slowly and leaned back in my seat. There it was, the missing money, or close enough. I stared at the diner receipt still on my dashboard. The ink had faded more, but I could still make out her name. I thought of Uncle Ray's worried eyes, of the kindness he didn't owe me, and of the quiet rage sitting in my chest like a stone. I took out my pen and added a line under her name. Step 3, take notes they'll never find. The next morning at work, Sandy waved a newspaper at me. You see this? Crypto's up again. People making fortunes overnight. I forced a smile. Some people always do. He grinned. You into that stuff? Not yet, I said. But I'm learning. The day passed slowly. Between orders I listened. People talk more than they realize, especially about money. One customer bragged about flipping houses. Another complained about taxes. Each sentence felt like a puzzle piece sliding into place. By late afternoon, a storm had started rolling in again. The diner lights flickered and Frankie decided to close early. I offered to finish cleaning so I could be alone. When everyone left, I turned off the radio and stood behind the counter, staring at the reflection of the neon sign in the window. It read Eat Good Feel Good, but half the letters were burned out. What remained looked more honest, at G Feel. I unlocked the office drawer and found the old fax machine Frankie never used anymore. I tore a page from my notebook, wrote down my stepmother's name, the trust address, and my father's account number. Then I faxed it to a number printed on one of the IRS forms I'd copied from the library. I didn't sign it, just sent it. As the paper slid through, I whispered, Step 4, plant seeds. When the confirmation beep sounded, a calm I hadn't felt in years settled over me. I wasn't just surviving now, I was moving. That night, I stopped by the diner again after closing. The windows were dark, but I could still smell coffee from the morning rush. I placed the diner receipt under the register, flat and centered, and pressed my palm over it. You'll come to me, I murmured, imagining her walking in one day, unaware of what waited. You always do when you need to fix your image. As I turned to leave, headlights swept across the window. For a second I thought it was Uncle Ray returning, but the car drove past without stopping. Still, that brief light caught something shiny near the door. A gold money clip someone had dropped. Inside were 3 bills and a business card. James Parker, financial consultant. I slipped it into my pocket. Maybe fate had a sense of humor. Outside the storm broke hard. Rain soaked my hair, my sleeves, my shoes, but I didn't run. I tilted my face up to the sky, eyes open. The water felt clean, like it was washing away the weakness she'd counted on. Tomorrow I'd start asking questions. Quietly, politely, the way women my age are expected to. I'd visit that address near the lake. I'd learn exactly how deep her lie went. But for now, I climbed back into my car, turned on the heater, and whispered the next line in my notebook aloud so I wouldn't forget it. Step 5. Wait until they think they're safe. The engine hummed, rain drummed steady on the roof, and I watched the diner lights fade in the rearview mirror until they were just a smear of red and gold in the wet dark. I smiled, small but certain. The plan was already in motion, and she didn't even know she'd walked into it. The diner lights disappeared behind me, swallowed by rain and darkness, but I didn't drive home. I kept circling the empty streets until the heater fogged the windows. When I finally parked outside the public library, the rain had slowed to a drizzle. The building sat quiet under the street lamp, a dull glow behind the frosted glass doors. I watched it for a long time, fingers tapping the steering wheel. Tomorrow, I thought. Tomorrow I start digging. The next morning I was the first one there. Mrs. Dunn, the librarian, unlocked the door at 9 on the dot and smiled the way people do when they pity you but don't want to show it. "Early bird again?" she asked. "Couldn't sleep," I said. Inside, the warmth smelled of paper, dust, and faint lemon polish. I headed straight for the computer lab, my coffee in one hand and notebook in the other. I typed cryptocurrency transfers into the search bar and watched pages load slower than molasses. Most of it was nonsense to me. Charts, algorithms, words like blockchain integrity and cold wallet security. But buried among them were pieces that made sense. Transaction ledgers, exchange records, tracing tools. I jotted everything down. My handwriting looked shaky at first but steadied the more I wrote. By noon I'd filled 6 pages and learned enough to know she hadn't just lost the money. No, she'd moved it, transferred it somewhere hidden where only she and maybe one other person could reach it. When the library closed for lunch, I stayed outside on the bench eating a peanut butter sandwich from my bag. Across the street, a man in a navy suit stepped out of a small office marked Parker and Associates, Financial Consulting. The name clicked instantly, the same James Parker printed on the business card I'd found outside the diner. He looked exactly like someone Martha would trust. Polished, charming, probably good at making numbers lie. I slipped the card from my pocket, turning it over in my hand. The back had an email scrawled in neat handwriting. j.parker@investsafe-co.com. That night, parked in my usual spot behind the grocery store, I set up a free email account under a new name, Grace Ellison. Then I typed, "Hello Mr. Parker. I was referred to you by a friend who mentioned your experience managing private investment accounts. I'm interested in learning how crypto holdings can be converted to real property assets. Confidentiality is very important to me." I read it 3 times before hitting send. My heart thudded like I'd just confessed to a crime. By morning there was a reply waiting. "Of course, Grace. Discretion is part of my service. Perhaps we can schedule a call?" Bingo. I waited 3 days before answering, just enough to seem cautious, not desperate. When I finally agreed to a call, I borrowed Sandy's old Bluetooth headset and used the diner's pay phone after closing. I could hear the clinking of dishes in the kitchen and the hum of the fridge as his smooth voice came through the line. "Miss Ellison, nice to meet you," he said. "May I ask how much you're hoping to convert?" "Hypothetically," I said, "around 800,000. He whistled softly. "Well, you're speaking to the right man." I smiled to myself. "So I've heard." He explained his process. Trust formation, offshore accounts, layered transfers. The exact pattern I'd suspected. And every few sentences, I threw in a question that only someone like Martha would have asked, based on what she'd said in our last call. Each time he answered like he'd heard it before. When I hung up, I sat in silence, the receiver still warm in my hand. He'd confirmed everything without realizing it. My stepmother wasn't just careless, she was laundering the money with his help. The next week I used every break at the diner to print public documents. Property records, company filings, state business registrations. The more I searched, the clearer the picture became. There was a paper trail, thin but real. The M.J. Caldwell Trust linked to a holding company called Silver Pine Assets, registered by Parker himself. I nearly laughed out loud in the library when I found it. The woman who once called me too soft to handle real money had built her fraud under a man's name she barely knew. Still, proof wasn't enough. I needed leverage. Something personal. One night after closing, I asked Frankie if I could check the diner's security cameras. "Someone's been stealing napkin boxes," I said casually. He shrugged and handed me the key. Inside the tiny security room, I fast-forwarded through hours of footage, half expecting nothing, until the camera from last Thursday stopped me cold. A familiar car pulled into the lot. Sleek, white, expensive. My stepmother's Lexus. She stepped out, adjusting her coat, and walked toward the diner door, but didn't enter. She placed an envelope under the mat and drove off. My stomach twisted. I rewound it twice to be sure. Then I hurried to the front, lifted the mat, and found the envelope still there, damp from humidity. Inside was a single page. "Helen, call me. We can still fix this." Fix this. My hands trembled, but not from fear. She'd come to my place of work, confident I'd still crawl back. I tore the paper neatly in half, then in half again, and fed it into the trash compactor. That night, I added another line to my notebook. Step 6. Make them reach out first. The following afternoon, Parker emailed again. "Hope our last call was useful. If you'd like, I can show you a sample contract used for asset conversion. I wrote back. That would be helpful. Could you forward the latest draft you prepared for your client last month? He replied within the hour, attaching a document labeled client_firm_sheet.pdf. When I opened it, my pulse quickened. Her initials. Her transaction amount. Her fake signature. Everything. I copied the file onto 3 separate flash drives. One went into my glove box, one under the diner's cash register, and one in a sealed envelope addressed to Internal Revenue Service, Fraud Division. I didn't send it yet. Not until I was ready. The next week felt strangely calm. I still served coffee, wiped counters, smiled at regulars, but inside, everything had shifted. I was no longer the woman sleeping in her car. I was building something, piece by piece, like a spider spinning web in the dark. One evening, a new customer sat at the counter. A young man in an expensive coat scrolling through his phone. When I brought his check, he glanced up. "You're Helen Caldwell, right?" My stomach dropped. "Who's asking?" He smiled politely. "Name's Ryan. I work with Mr. Parker. He mentioned you might stop by the office, but we never heard back." My pulse raced, but I forced a calm smile. "I've been busy. Small-town diner life, you know." He chuckled. "Understandable. Well, if you ever need guidance, we're happy to assist." He slipped a business card across the counter. His hand lingered just long enough for me to see the gold watch on his wrist. Engraved initials MZ Martha Caldwell. My face stayed still, but inside I was fire. "Appreciate it," I said softly. "Maybe I'll stop by." When he left, I flipped the card over. The back had a handwritten number. Hers. He was still watching, still trying to control the board. That night, I added another note to my list. Step 7. Let them think they're winning. The next morning, I called the number from a blocked line. She answered immediately. "Helen. Thank God. You got my note." I did. "Then you know this isn't what you think it is," she rushed on. "James is just a consultant. The funds are being moved for safekeeping. I promise you'll get your share soon." "My share," I repeated slowly. "That's interesting. Considering you told me there was nothing left." She hesitated. I panicked. Things got complicated. "Did they?" I said quietly. "Or did you just get greedy?" Her breath hitched. "I don't deserve this treatment. After everything I did for your father." I cut her off. "You're right. You don't deserve this." Then I hung up. My hands were steady now. I no longer needed her to admit guilt, she already had. That evening, as thunder rolled in, I parked near the diner's back door and opened my notebook one more time. The pages smelled faintly of coffee and rain. I flipped past listen, collect, plant seeds until I reached a blank page. I wrote, Step 8, pull the thread. Then below it, target, Parker and Associates, fraud complaint, attach evidence. The flash drive glinted under the dashboard light, the plastic warm from my hand. I tucked it back into the envelope and sealed it shut. Outside, lightning cracked over the rooftops, followed by a long, low rumble that shook the glass. I watched the first drops of rain splatter against the windshield and whispered, "It's starting." But even then, a small voice in me, older, quieter, wiser, asked if I was ready for what came after. Because once you pull one thread, the whole web comes down. I didn't answer. I just turned the key in the ignition, feeling the engine hum beneath my hands. The diner sign flickered once, twice, then went dark as the power cut out from the storm. Perfect, I thought. The world was finally as dark as she deserved. The storm rattled the diner windows until they sounded like bones shaking in a tin cup. Lightning split the sky again, bright enough to bleach the wet asphalt white for a heartbeat. I kept my hands on the steering wheel, the envelope with the flash drive sitting on the passenger seat. It looked harmless, thin, ordinary, but it carried the weight of everything I'd lost. When thunder rolled across the valley, I eased the car into gear and drove toward town. The wipers struggled to keep up with the rain, slapping back and forth like they were scolding me. My father used to say storms reveal what's weak: roofs, trees, people. I wasn't sure which one I was yet. The post office sat on a quiet corner, lights still uneven at that late hour. I parked under the awning, rain hammering the roof, and stared at the blue drop box by the curb. My heart pounded slow and steady, like it understood the gravity better than my mind. Once it's in there, I whispered to myself, there's no going back. I rolled down the window halfway, just enough to push the envelope through the slot. The metal flap clanged shut with a hollow sound that felt final. The storm didn't pause, the world didn't change, but something inside me did. On the drive back, the rain softened into mist. I turned onto the diner road out of habit, and that's when I noticed a car parked behind the dumpsters. White, sleek, familiar. Her Lexus. My breath caught. She was here. I turned off my headlights and coasted forward until I could see her silhouette through the windshield. She was sitting perfectly still, hands folded on the steering wheel, her phone glowing faint blue against her face. For a moment I just watched. The woman who'd stolen everything I had now sat 50 feet away, drenched in shadows, maybe realizing she was about to lose it all. Or maybe she was here to make sure I didn't speak first. I killed the engine. The rain ticked gently on the hood as I stepped out, my shoes sinking into the wet gravel. When I reached her window, she startled, clutching her chest. "Helen. God, you scared me." "I'm sure you scare easy these days," I said evenly. She lowered the window a few inches. Her hair was perfect, even in this weather. The scent of her perfume, rose and something expensive, fought against the damp air. "We need to talk," she said. "About what? The fake trust? The stolen accounts?" She flinched just barely. "You've been digging." "I learned from the best," I said. Her eyes flicked toward my car, then back at me. "You don't understand how deep this goes. Parker, he's not who you think he is." "Neither are you," I replied. The silence between us was thick enough to feel. A truck rumbled past on the highway, its headlights flashing over her face. She looked older than I remembered, drawn, desperate. Finally, she said, "You sent it, didn't you?" I didn't answer. "I can fix this," she pleaded. "If you'll just fix it." I cut in. "You think this is a leaky faucet? You drained a lifetime, Martha. My husband's years, my trust, everything." She swallowed hard, eyes glistening. "I didn't mean for it to go this far." "But it did," I said. "And now it's too late." I turned and walked back toward my car, but her voice followed me. "You'll regret this. You think you can fight people like him? Like me?" I stopped, looked over my shoulder. "You taught me exactly how." Then I got in the car and drove off. By morning the storm had cleared, but the diner looked different. Brighter, almost fragile under the sun. I was behind the counter refilling salt shakers when Frankie turned on the radio. The announcer's voice came through, casual but sharp. "Local authorities are investigating multiple reports of financial fraud involving a regional consulting firm. No arrests yet, but insiders claim high-value accounts are frozen pending review." Sandy glanced up from the register. "Think that's about those crypto people?" "Probably," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. But inside, a knot loosened. The trap was working. That afternoon the doorbell chimed and my Uncle Ray walked in again. He looked anxious, his hat clutched tight in his hand. "Helen, I need to talk to you." I nodded toward the back booth. He sat, leaned forward and whispered, "She came to my house last night." I blinked. "Martha?" He nodded. "Showed up crying, saying she was being set up. Said someone sent her files to the authorities." My heart kicked, but I kept my tone calm. "And what did you tell her?" "That I didn't believe a word." He hesitated. "But she looked scared, Helen. Real scared. Like she's finally seeing what she married into." He lowered his voice further. "You didn't?" I met his gaze. "I just told the truth." He studied me for a long time, then sighed. "Your father would have been proud of your backbone." I smiled faintly. "Or worried about it." We sat in silence until his coffee went cold. When he left, he pressed a folded note into my hand. "She's planning something," he said. "Be careful." After my shift, I opened the note. It was a phone number. Unfamiliar, local. Beneath it, in his handwriting, Parker's office line. That night I called. A woman's voice answered, professional and clipped. "Parker and Associates." "I'd like to speak with Mr. Parker," I said. "May I ask who's calling?" "Tell him it's about the Caldwell transfer." There was a long pause, then static. "One moment." When he came on, his tone was different. Tight, guarded. "Miss Ellison?" "Not quite," I said. "It's Helen Caldwell. You remember my stepmother?" Another pause, then a nervous chuckle. "Ah, yes, of course. What can I do for you, Miss Caldwell?" "I just wanted to congratulate you," I said softly. You've officially made the news. The silence that followed was so sharp I could hear him exhale through his nose. You don't know what you've done, he said finally. You've stirred up things bigger than either of us. Maybe, I said. But I'm not the one who stole anything. He started to speak again, but I hung up before he could. My hands were shaking, but it wasn't fear. It was release. An hour later, as I was locking up the diner, my phone rang again. No caller ID. I answered anyway. Do you feel powerful now? Her voice hissed. Hello to you too, I said. You're ruining innocent lives. Innocent? I almost laughed. Tell me, how innocent does a thief feel right before the knock on the door? You don't understand what Parker's capable of, she said, voice rising. He's dangerous. He'll bury both of us. Her panic sounded real this time, trembling at the edges. For a brief second, pity flickered somewhere deep inside me, then vanished. I already buried myself once, I said quietly. I survived it. Can you? She didn't answer. The line crackled, then went dead. I stood there, phone still pressed to my ear, watching lightning flicker far off on the horizon. The storm hadn't left. It had just moved further away, waiting. The next morning, 2 men in suits came into the diner. They ordered coffee but didn't drink it. One showed a badge discreetly near his chest. We're looking for Helen Caldwell, he said. I wiped my hands on a towel. That's me. He nodded. We may need to ask you a few questions about a financial complaint involving your stepmother and an associate named James Parker. Frankie looked nervous, but I stayed calm. I'll cooperate fully, I said. They asked where I'd been the previous night, who I'd spoken to, whether I had any knowledge of missing assets. I told them the truth mostly. I said Martha had admitted to mismanaging funds. I said Parker had pressured her. I didn't mention the emails, the flash drives, or the trap itself. When they left, Sandy exhaled hard. What was that about? Just the past catching up, I said softly. By evening, word had spread. Someone spotted Martha's car outside the police station. Then another regular said they'd seen her escorted inside. The diner buzzed with quiet gossip, half whispers and curious glances my way. I didn't confirm anything. That night I drove to the lake. The property was quiet, the kind of silence that follows ruin. The house lights were off, but the mailbox overflowed with letters. I stepped out, the gravel crunching beneath my shoes, and walked up the path. Through the front window I could just make out movement. A man pacing, phone pressed to his ear. Parker. His voice carried faintly through the glass. They froze the accounts, every single one. She promised me this was clean. I smiled to myself and stepped back into the shadows. When I reached my car, the phone rang again. Unknown number. I answered, expecting her voice. But it was him. You set me up, Parker said, calm but shaking underneath. You don't know what you've started. On the contrary, I said. I know exactly. Do you think the truth will save you? You're as guilty as she is. Maybe, I said. But I kept receipts. He laughed bitterly. You won't stop this storm, Helen. I don't need to, I said. I just need it to wash you away. The line went dead. I sat there in the dark, listening to the lake lap against the shore. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed, faint, rising, fading again. I opened my notebook, the pages damp from my palms, and wrote a single line under Step 8. Pull the thread. Step 9. Cut them loose. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of rain again. I looked toward the lake house one last time, its windows flickering with police lights in the distance. And then my phone buzzed with one final message. Blocked sender, short and cold. You'll regret this, Helen. I always land on my feet. I smiled faintly at the screen. We'll see, I whispered. Then I dropped the phone onto the passenger seat, started the car, and drove into the dark, the storm chasing close behind. The rain chased me all the way home, a steady whisper against the windshield. Every few miles, the thunder rolled like it was reminding me what storms always do. Clear the air by tearing it apart first. I didn't turn on the radio. The only sound I wanted was the hum of the tires and the faint vibration of something ending. When I pulled into the diner lot, the neon sign had burned out completely. No eat good, feel good tonight. Just darkness and the faint smell of wet asphalt. I left the engine running for a minute, staring at my reflection in the window. My hair clung to my face, silver strands matted by the rain. I didn't look like someone who'd just won. But maybe victory didn't look the way I'd imagined. It was quieter, lonelier. I grabbed my coat and stepped inside. The door creaked like it knew every secret that had been whispered here. The air smelled faintly of bleach and coffee. I flicked on one light above the counter and sat in my usual stool, the one with the crack running through the vinyl. My notebook lay where I'd left it under the register. I flipped to the last page, step 9, cut them loose. I stared at the words for a long time, wondering what loose really meant. Was it letting them fall or letting them go? The bell above the door startled me. I turned and froze. Martha stood there, drenched, coat hanging heavy with rain, mascara smudged like bruises under her eyes. She didn't look like the woman who used to glide into parties and command rooms. She looked hollow, fragile. I didn't stand up. You shouldn't be here. I had nowhere else to go, she said, voice trembling. They took everything, Helen. The accounts, the cars, even the house. James is gone. Vanished. The police think I helped him. You did, I said simply. She stepped closer. You don't understand, he threatened me. Said if I didn't cooperate he'd expose me, ruin me. I folded my hands on the counter. Looks like he kept his promise. Her eyes flashed. You think this is funny? You think destroying me makes you better than him? No, I said quietly. It just makes me free. She looked around the empty diner, shaking her head. This is what you traded everything for? Grease and coffee cups. This place gave me dignity when you took everything else, I said. You wouldn't understand that. For a moment neither of us spoke. The rain softened outside, the kind of drizzle that sounds almost like forgiveness. Then she reached into her purse, slowly, shakily, and pulled out an envelope. She placed it on the counter between us. This is all that's left, she said. My last account. It's in your name. I didn't touch it. Why? Her voice cracked. Because I was wrong. About everything. I thought power meant never having to answer to anyone. But it just means you lose people slower. I studied her face, searching for the same performer who'd once told me we lost the money with that perfect calm. She wasn't there anymore. The woman standing in front of me was stripped bare, desperate for mercy. I finally said, I don't want your money. She blinked. Then what do you want from me? The truth, I said. All of it. She looked down. Parker approached me 6 months after your father passed. Said he could double the insurance payout through crypto investments. I believed him. I thought I'd make enough to set us both up for life. But when it went south I panicked. I forged the trust papers, shifted everything under my name to hide it. Then I told you it was gone. Her shoulders sagged. I wanted to fix it before you found out. I really did. But every time I tried I just dug deeper. I let her words hang in the air. I'd waited months to hear them and now they felt smaller than the silence around them. Finally I stood, reached under the counter and pulled out the same diner receipt I'd kept since the beginning. The ink had faded, her name barely visible. I laid it next to the envelope. You remember this? She frowned. What is it? The first thing you ever paid for me, I said softly. A lie. Her hand trembled as she reached for the receipt. Helen, please. I'm sorry. Sorry, I echoed. You said that word the day you stole my future. I think we're past apologies. Her eyes filled with tears. Then what are we now? I looked at her and said, even. For a long moment she didn't move. Then she pushed the envelope closer. Take it anyway. Start over. I don't deserve it. I took a deep breath, then slid it back to her side. Neither do I. Her lip quivered. What will you do now? I smiled faintly. Life. You should try it. She turned, hesitated by the door and whispered, You've won, Helen. I shook my head. No, Martha. I just stopped losing. The door closed softly behind her. The bell chimed once and went still. I exhaled, feeling the years fall off my shoulders like old dust. I poured myself a cup of coffee, black and bitter. Outside, dawn was breaking, pale blue bleeding into the horizon. The storm had passed. By mid-morning the diner filled with regulars again. Frankie came in whistling, Sandy tied her apron, the smell of bacon filled the air. It was an ordinary day, the kind of day I used to take for granted. Around noon Uncle Ray stopped by. He took one look at me and said, You look lighter. Maybe I finally am, I said. He nodded toward the window. They arrested that Parker fella. It's all over the news. Seems your stepmother turned over evidence against him. I didn't reply. Just poured him coffee and smiled. Justice has a way of circling back. He chuckled. You always were patient. Patience, I said, is just revenge with better timing. That night after closing, I sat alone at the counter again. The envelope Martha had left sat unopened beside me. I considered throwing it away, but instead I opened it. Inside was a cashier's check, made out to me for $50,000, and a short note in her handwriting. You were right. I needed to learn what loss felt like. I folded the note, slid it into my notebook, and tucked the check under the register for safekeeping. I wasn't sure yet what I'd do with it, but I knew one thing. It wouldn't be for me. The next morning, I drove to the local women's shelter, the one I'd stayed near when things were at their worst. The building was small, plain, but the smell of warm soup and the sound of quiet laughter met me at the door. I handed the director the check without explaining much. She looked at me in surprise. Are you sure? She asked. I nodded. Tell them it's from someone who learned the hard way what starting over costs. When I left, the wind had picked up, but the air was crisp and clear. The storm had washed the streets clean, leaving small puddles that reflected the sky. That evening I closed the diner early. The silence felt peaceful for once. I wiped the counter, stacked the cups, and took out my notebook one final time. The pages were warped from rain, stained with coffee, filled with my own handwriting, each step, each scar. I turned to the last page and wrote, Step 10, end the cycle. Then beneath it, final note, forgiveness is not forgetting. It's refusing to let them live inside you any longer. I tore the page out, folded it carefully, and placed it in the cash drawer beside the old diner receipt. Both belonged there, proof that revenge could end where peace began. As I walked outside, the street lamps flickered on, their glow soft and steady. Across the parking lot, a single car idled, a small sedan I didn't recognize. For a second my heart raced, but then the driver waved. It was Martha. She didn't get out, didn't call. She just lifted her hand in a quiet gesture of thanks. I stood there watching her drive away until her taillights disappeared into the distance. No bitterness, no victory. Just quiet. When I went back inside, I turned off the lights and locked the door. The reflection in the glass showed a woman older, worn, but unbroken. I whispered almost to myself, paid in full. Then I smiled, small and certain, and walked into the night. Thank you for watching. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe and join our growing community of women who've lived, loved, and risen again. Your story matters, and so does your voice.